Hello and welcome. I'm Valerie Nicol, President of Community Healthcare Systems, joining you today from the traditional unceded territories of the Colwood people on Vancouver Island. On behalf of our team, which includes our founder, Dave Saunders, and our planning expert, Mark Holland, I am excited and grateful to be speaking with the City of Colwood Mayor, Doug Kobayashi, today. He'll be sharing his experience of visioning and launching the Colwood Primary Care Clinic model. If your community is looking for innovative solutions to your lack of primary care access, you will not want to miss this. Welcome, Mayor Doug Kobayashi. It's really good to have this opportunity to connect with you and hear firsthand about the first municipally owned and operated primary care clinic in Canada. Really excited for our viewers and listeners who may not be familiar with this, just to give them a little bit of background first. So if you would, how long have you been the mayor of Colwood?
Okay, I'm just completing my fourth year. So this year's election year. So I've been mayor for 3.5 years, I guess, just over 3.5 years. I was a city councillor before that, there for 4 years.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's a lot that you have done in your first term, let's say that. What did you know about primary health care before you embarked on this journey?
Well, it's interesting. While I was a counselor here, I haven't had a family doctor for over 20 years here, living in BC. And it wasn't until I had heart failure back in 2017, because of heart failure, a family doctor was forced upon me. So I got to get a family doctor. And it was interesting talking with this family doctor. He was telling me all the woes of medicine, because I was just saying, why does it take so long to get a family doctor? I think this is ridiculous. And luckily, I've been a healthy person all that time. I was generally healthy, being a former Royal Military College graduate, of course, way back when. And I was pretty athletic, so I've never had suffered any type of health issues, So in fact, the last time I had an annual checkup was probably over 20 years ago, back in 2016. So it was a long time, and I thought I was perfectly healthy until I had congestive heart failure. And after all that, after getting through it and them figuring out it was a genetic thing for me, it wasn't built up or anything like that. It was genetic, purely genetic. He says, oh, by the way, I want to tell you something else. He says, you're diabetic. And I'm like, what? He says, but we didn't want to get you all up and, stressed out about that, because we were trying to deal with your heart failure problem. So, but, the interesting thing that he said to me, he says, the shameful thing about all this, he said, it was all preventable. If you maintained your body, you got checkups every year, you wouldn't have got to the state where you got to. So it was an interesting point. And then we started talking philosophically. We after my appointment, the following week we went out for coffee, and he was telling me all the woes of family medicine. And I said, geez, we got to do something about this. And at the time, being just a counselor on city council, I had suggested this, but the council of the day really did have an appetite for this, because they said, that's not our swimming lane. Well, I guess it isn't, but, I think it's wrong that we think this way. But anyways, to make a long story short, when I was running for mayor, I went out and I did something totally different. Before coming up with my platform, I went out and I surveyed 800 homes throughout our city, broke it down into 8 distinct areas, and knocked on 100 doors and asked them, what were their top 3 or 4 priorities, what's bugging you today, sort of thing. And the number one thing that came out was, we need family doctors, which was interesting, and I made it part of my platform. Now, everyone thought that was a stretch. I came out, the platform that I came out with was the citizens platform, in actual fact. And when I put that particular thing, that I'm going to do something about this. I saw those signs, every family deserves a family doctor. It really struck a chord to me. And I thought to myself, wow, here I am going through this and not having a family doctor. And just after I got elected as mayor, about 6 months after, the last family doctor clinic in Colwood closed down. They picked up and moved. And so...
Big storm.
Yep, it was. And I could tell you right now, we had and when I presented the one slide to the Minister of Health at the time, Adrian Dix, I had the one slide, and my first slide said 0, Z-E-R-O. And that's exactly the number of family doctors that we had in a community of almost 23,000 people. None. No one could believe this, but they looked up their database and went, wow, he's right. There is no family doctors. So that's what started all this.
Wow, that's an incredible origin story right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and well, it makes sense. Personal experience led to professional action, and here we are.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to get into the kinds of things that I know people have been asking you, and that, people that have heard about the Colwood Clinic model are very curious about. So I guess like maybe talking about what it is and how it works a little bit, so people get an understanding. Governance and accountability comes up a lot because this is obviously very different than what most people have experienced, for sure in British Columbia and in Canada as well, in terms of how primary care is being accessed in the community. So can you just talk a little bit about how the clinic is governed within municipal operations?
Sure. So it is a department of the city. Okay, we'll make no doubt about it. All the people, including the MOAs, the operations manager, the doctors, they're all city employees. And they all have municipal benefits, including pensions. Every employee, they're like any other department within the city. The difference here, it's similar to how we manage and govern, say, the RCMP detachment here. We don't tell the RCMP how to do their jobs. We just don't. And, we do provide the budgets. They ask us for what their people requirements are, how many constables they need, and we provide it. And they manage it completely independent of us. But that doesn't mean we don't have an overall governance role. They talk to us and they say, what are your priorities? And we tell them what our priorities are. But they do execute it. Now, being an RCMP detachment here, unlike the Victoria Police Department, we don't have a police board. And there is no way with the current government and how it's set up that we would have a police board because there's no space for that. So what we did with the medical clinic, we said, hey, this is a bit of an issue because we don't have the wherewithal and the knowledge to provide, proper governance. So we did set up a society, and they're trying to get their nonprofits status right now. We call them a board of trustees right now, rather than, a real society at this point in time. Like I said, they've applied for it. But on that board right now, we have two family doctors that are on the board. And we have, a lawyer, and we have other professionals that sit on this. So they sort of provide that governance for us right now. And so it is separate from the city in a way, we're keeping that arm's length. But, as far as their budget goes, they do apply to the city. And of course, we give them what they need. But right now it's fairly simple because we're a startup and we're trying to get our model working properly right now. And how it works right now is we've stated over and over and over, we're not using taxpayer dollars. So if you look at our last 2 years, there's been no taxation increase to operate this particular clinic. Now, how did we start it up? Yes, we did. We had a reserve fund that we set up, and because there were startup costs that were required, just getting the building leased, getting all the things that you need to have done. So we did do that. But we created a business plan, and we sort of said, okay, it's going to take us 5 years before it's at that point where, we don't have to use any more reserve funds, and it can operate, by itself, zero costs, basically on a zero cost basis. The interesting part of that is that we know just from the revenue we've achieved with our current doctors that we absolutely believe that this is absolutely feasible and can go forward. So we know that now, that's factual. So, but it's getting that core of doctors right now. We need 8 doctors, of which we have 4 now. So, it was a little slower because, is it a mistake, the decision we made? But, you can argue this right now. We could have filled up all 8 positions very, very quickly. Believe me, it was that simple. There was a lot of local doctors and just within the area that said, I want to join. But the problem with that is they brought an attachment list with them. And so we're no better off. There's no net plus for us right now. So we made the decision early on that, we're not going to do this. We're going to recruit from outside the province, outside the country. And if you look at all our doctors right now, they're all from outside the country or outside the province. That's exactly who we brought in. And the other thing that makes us a little different right now is that because it was a actually a clinic that we used our reserve funds for, and it was just for primary care, longitudinal care. We were able to sort of say the only patients we're going to accept are Colwood residents because we were using Colwood dollars.
Right.
Will that stay that way forever? No, I don't think so. If we look after everybody, my plan right now is absolutely let's expand this. Like let's open it to Machosen, our neighbors next door. Let's move South Langford, because they're right next door to us right now. So
that's kind of one of the subsequent questions I want to ask in this space is how would you describe balancing the municipal priorities, the reason why Colwood wanted to do this, with expectations of the healthcare system about how you do this and where and for whom?
Okay, I hope I understand your question correctly, but this took a lot of homework. When we first did this, we went off and we looked at every community health center. We got tours, we asked a lot of questions, went to Shoreline, which is the model that I thought we were going to do in the beginning. I can tell you that for sure. And after talking with them, they were of just immense help. The acting executive director there, they sort of explained some things and, they were just going through some misery themselves because they had 100% turnover of their MOAs. Didn't even understand how important medical office assistants were, right? Very, very important. And then talking with, we had groups of medical doctors and we talked about this at great lengths, It's not so much attracting doctors. We're very successful. BC has been very successful right now with our whole U.S. plan right now. But it was more retention because what I heard from doctors, they're going to go, some will go where they get the better deal on the overhead that they get charged, right? So they move. And so, doing everything that the government was doing at the time didn't attack that problem of retention. Hence, that's why we came up with this model, because we said, hey, what about the retention side? Now, this isn't going to be appealing to all doctors. And I made sure that people really understood this, because when you go work at a clinic where they charge you, whatever they charge you 30%, of your take-in for overhead, a doctor can make a lot more money by seeing a lot more patients in a day. We're not requiring that here. That's the big difference. We're sort of saying, hey, we want you to have a quality lifestyle here right now. And we are going to offer you all these municipal benefits. So it attracts a certain demographic of doctors. So we're not saying that this is the silver bullet solution out there right now.
Right.
But
Can you say a bit more about who that doctor is and what they're looking for, that this is a fit for them?
It's generally so. The demographic we seem to be hitting are those that are probably 5 years after they've graduated. They've basically they're taking care of their loans. They're at that stage.
Yep.
And they understand what a defined pension plan is. That's another funny one, because I'll talk to you in a second about that one. So they're, the ones that we've gotten so far are basically between the 35 and 40-year age mark right now. So, that's the target right now we seem to be hitting. However, the last one we just hired on Tuesday here is as fresh out of school. Totally different. I think her loans were looked after by her family. So, she was able to join our clinic. So, but let me just get into what I was talking to you about before. It's interesting when you talk to the really young doctors, the ones that are just about to graduate or just finishing residency or whatever. It's interesting what they want. And this was an eye-opener for me, a big eye-opener. Their concern is their big, giant student loans, $300,000 plus, right, when they graduate. So, of course, what are they trying to do is they're trying to pay off those loans. And coming to work at our clinic is not conducive to that, because they've got a fixed salary, right? So it's not that attractive to them, right? They're looking for someplace where they can work hard, long hours, and make enough income to pay off those loans. So one of the interesting suggestions that was made to me at the time was, well, why doesn't the city take on the loans? And, you can borrow at cheaper. They were smart enough to figure that one out.
Mm-hmm.
And, maybe you can attract more of us. But, we looked at that and we said, we're losing our focus. We thought, oh yeah, what a good idea. We looked at different things. We try to look at a hybrid model where some are on the work as employees, some work as contracted doctors. But it was scatterbrained. We were going out like a shotgun again. So we said, no, let's refocus on what our core values were, what our principles were. And hence we are where we are right now.
Interesting. Sounds like a lot of options out there, but
Yeah.
Colwood stayed true.
Yeah.
What your goals? Yeah, it's easy. I know when you work in this space, there's new options being thrown into the mix all the time. But you have to, I guess, as a person who wants and needs a family doctor, and as a community who wants access to primary care, you have to figure out what your values are and stick to them, because it's so easy to get led in all different directions, some of which are short-lived.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that's going to really help people understand, where your values and priorities have kept you and your North Star in place through this really interesting journey.
Yes. And the other key part of it, I mean, if you were to interview our doctors, they really truly feel that the community has embraced them, right? They really have.
Mm.
And some of the doctors have even joined in with it within the community and started their own programs for, the well-being of the citizens. We have our very first doctor, of course, Cassandra. She started Walk With Your Doc program, in fact, and that again this year. And they get involved with the community, and that's what I love about it. They are part of the community. So, and I think this is what's the big attraction. Once these doctors are coming in and being interviewed, they're talking with these doctors and they're saying, wow, this is a different model, a totally different model. I have a little story to tell you. One of our newest doctors from Colorado, Dr. Mo, he was an interesting guy because the Minister of Health for Canada, asked him, how he felt about this now. And he had been with us for maybe 3 months at the time. And he said, well, the mayor lied to me. Yeah. And then he says, no, what he said, no, it's 10 times better than what he said. So, that was a pretty big testimonial. So,
I'd say, do you have recollection of what he said? Like what is 10 times better than he thought?
Just what we said about the lifestyle here, the lifestyle, the working, the working 37 and a half hours a week, not the 60-hour weeks, that's what they came here for. They wanted that lifestyle. They want to start a family, on and on and on. So, that's what he basically meant by that.
Wow, that's amazing. So just to circle back and kind of close off the how you got this up and running piece, what were the biggest cost pressures for you that you didn't anticipate? Like what things you thought you knew, but it was bigger or more extreme than you thought?
Excellent question. So the one thing that hit us square on the face was the cost of recruitment. That was way bigger than we anticipated. And maybe because we thought in the beginning that we were just going to steal doctors from everywhere locally. So there was no cost. But when you make the decision that you're going to recruit from outside the province and outside the country, the costs, just moving people right now, right, is a big dollar value. But just some of the other costs that are involved in recruiting foreign doctors, it's a lot higher than we anticipated. So the whole recruitment cost is the one that was the biggest surprise. Everything else, we already knew what our costs were for leasing the facilities. So all those things were all fixed. So nothing, no big surprises. Some things were a little less, some things a little more, but it balanced itself out. But the biggest cost by far was the recruitment cost. Never anticipated this. So got caught off guard a little bit right now. But that's why I set up this fundraising gala now, because once I found out it was quite legal to do a fundraiser to raise funds for recruitment. So
I heard it was really successful.
Yeah, way better than we anticipated.
Amazing.
When it comes to healthcare, I tell you, everyone jumps in. I didn't even think I was going to be, because the cost of just to attend was high, and didn't anticipate that we would be sold out. Like, we had a lot of people, private citizens within the city that wanted to attend, but we had no more seats.
Well, I'm guessing most or all of them themselves or their loved ones don't have a doctor right now.
That could be part of it too.
Yeah, amazing. So also to this question about sort of the financial challenges of doing something so radically different, what funding or policy enablers from the province, so in our case in British Columbia, were necessary, helpful? Like how did that transpire for you?
Okay, sure. So I want to make it very crystal clear. We did not take one penny from the province on this. Okay?
Nothing.
Nothing. Now, you might hear that, well, no, the province gave you some money. No, they gave me, I said I had two goals. I had to stand up something very, very quickly when we lost our clinic. So
Right.
we ended up resetting up the walk-in clinic on Colwood Corners. So the province pitched in the money. It was over $300,000 to renovate. It was an old former clinic, and they renovated. They added a couple office spaces, and that's the one that was being run by the West Shore
Primary Care Society.
Society. Yes, they ended up running it, which is fine. I had no issue with that, and it was supposed to be, to tell you the truth, a walk-in clinic only. But now they've only have one doctor and one nurse practitioner that do that part of it right now. And the remaining doctors are there for longitudinal care, primary care. But with our particular clinic, nothing came from the province. Absolutely nothing. But the methodology that we do use, though, so people say, well, how do you pay the doctors? Well, we do use the LFP, right? So the longitudinal family payment plan, right? That's how we bill. So we shadow bill. So how that works basically is the doctors assign payment, they bill, and the payment is assigned to the city. So everything is transparent. They get a fixed salary every 2 weeks, just like how the rest of the municipal employees are paid. We pay for, all their usables, whatever they need. And so, but there's that's another key issue here is that, remember, these doctors do no administration, right? It's entirely looked after by the city. We give them the best IT support. We probably got the most ironclad IT system, information technology system as far as security goes, very secure. We provide all the recruitment. They don't recruit. We do it through our HR department. The payroll is looked after. All the administrative support comes from the city. And people say, well, that must cost a lot of money. Well, no, it doesn't. It did initially when you are first starting up. But once you get someone's name in the payroll system, it's there. And they push a button every 2 weeks and you get paid. It's magic. So that is true. And initially setting up the information technology system in there was a cost. But it's not a big cost now. It's minor. It's so small that we don't even track it now because there were some of the metrics that we had set up.
So they're on the longitudinal family practice payment program, but you're handling all the admin that if they were running their own practice, they would have to still figure out how to do that, oversee it, hire people, manage them. Okay. That makes a lot of sense then, that they're really, really free to see patients. And I'm curious, so the LFP model comes with an attachment expectation of, I think it's 1,250 patients per position.
Yeah.
So are your physicians on that track as well? To how many?
Absolutely. And Valerie, as you probably know, that number depends on
Complexity.
the complexity, right? That's the bottom line. Now, with our first doctor, Cassandra Moldovan, she also does all the sports injuries now. We went and bought a $50,000 ultrasound machine for her. So she's looking after all the sports injuries here in the West Shore. So her expectations is that she only is required to do 900 patients because she does all this other billing right now. So it works out actually to our benefit right now. But all the other doctors are tracked that way. I think that was a question that you had asked me before about, do we have metrics? Oh, absolutely. Because we use that as a metric, right? How many attached patients do you have? Another key one is burn rate. You got to make sure we're bringing in more revenue than it's is, right? So we did set up about 6 metrics, which are reported on quarterly right now. We look at the wait times now too, because that's another key efficiency of the clinic. A lot of people say, geez, you don't see any lineups in there, people sitting around there. No, everything is well scheduled, and it's pretty phenomenal, the system that they have, and it's very efficient actually. So we set up a number of metrics like that. So we've got some pretty darn smart people right now working the clinic for us.
Wow. So those doctors really are freed up in a big way to provide patient care that others who are running their own practices are not.
Yeah. Now, I feel sorry for our very first doctor. When we first started it, of course, you're learning things, right? And for the first 4 or 5 months there, it was pretty rough for her because, she was doing everything along with our MOA. They were looking after everything. But once we got into the swing of things now, it's working pretty efficiently.
That's great. Okay. So we've already kind of touched on the physician recruitment process and, your approach to retention, which sounds great for physicians of a certain age and stage of their career, which is, you figured out what your target physician demographic is and targeted it, which sounds, smart, as opposed to casting a massive net and hoping you get something that works. So
yeah.
That sounds good. So in terms of now that you have people and you're still learning as you go, what would you say are your strategies for long-term retention? And I think you've already answered the second part of the question, which is preventing physician burnout,
right,
which is removing non-medical duties from their to-do list.
Yes.
But in terms of long-term retention, what seems to you to be the secret sauce in Colwood so far?
It is exactly what you just said. It's just preventing burnout. But the biggest golden handcuffs, the pension.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's a very attractive pension. That's why people are long-term government employees, right? It's what they call the golden handcuffs, right? So
Right. Yep.
I hate to say that, but there's a lot of truth in that right now too. If you love what you're doing and you get that benefit in the end. And I just want to tell you a story. It's a very interesting, true story. I won't reveal who the doctor was, but there was a local doctor here who owned his own clinic. And for many, many years, he decided this was a really good thing. His pension plan was when he retired, he was going to sell his practice. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
He got to that age where he could sell his practice. Couldn't sell it. He tried to give it away. He couldn't give it away. And then he ended up paying people to take it over. Now, that was his pension. That was his pension plan. Now, I know that they can choose to have ours with the College of Surgeons and all that stuff. It's something minor, but the surprise is for a lot of these retiring doctors is, and it's like myself, I found this too, you think you're doing all the right things by putting away into RSPs all your life, only to find out when you finally get to retire how much it's not worth. There's a big surprise, right? What happened here? And, annual statements, but I was so busy, I never really paid attention to it, right? You win some, you lose some, but then when I finally got to retire, I found out, wow, this is nothing like they told me. Like, I figured it would double, the rule of 70 here, like if I was even getting 7% return in 10 years, it should have doubled itself, but it didn't happen. And I think a lot of them find out about that. They go, oh my God. But the beautiful thing about a defined pension plan, of course, it's the last thing that's going to run out of money, right? It's government, and in this case, and so it's probably the lowest risk type of pension out there. I've had pension plans with companies that have the companies, 15 years after I've left them, then they go Chapter 11 on me, and then all of a sudden I find out my pension that I had with them, it was worth nothing. So I've had that happen too. So this is just, it's that safety, it's for some people, like I said, it's not for everyone, but it is for that. And that's the market that we're going after, actually. So
right, that makes sense. So I have another question. So with this very specific, we'll say demographic of physicians that you've recruited to your model, How does it work when they want to take time off and you need locums?
That I know they were working on this right now. I can tell you that, Valerie, that they're looking after that, because that's about to happen to us right now, where
To be continued.
yeah, it's to be continued. But there's a solution around it, and I've heard some good things that we've managed to do this and this and this. So I don't have the total story on that right now, but it will be looked after.
I'll put that on the list for our next follow-up.
For sure.
Okay. So in terms of like the nuts and bolts of setting up this clinic, you've talked a lot about, like what happened kind of seamlessly and then what were some challenges. Were there any operational hurdles in launching?
Yes. The biggest thing when we first launched, this is really big, was when we got around to do our very first billing. We followed what they told us. We followed everything, on the internet. We had people coaching us, from the ministry. You would fill something in, and 2 weeks later they'll say, "Oh, you forgot about this." Okay, we fill it in. And then you resubmit it. 2 weeks later, they come back and, "Oh, you forgot about this." And I could tell you, on our very first billing, it took us 3.5 months to get payment on our very first bill. So imagine if you were a private clinic doing this. You couldn't cash flow that. Like, you could do that. And we had people that were experienced in this thing too, so it was an interesting problem that we had. We've cured it now, working with the Ministry of Health right now. It's all fixed now, and there's no issues there now. But it was a big problem in the beginning. The other thing that was wrong was the electronic record system, the electronic
The EMR.
right, the EMR. That was a pain. It took us 3 different software packages to use, and I won't tell you which ones were just outrightly just bad. That's not, I don't want to get sued here, but
Right.
It took us to our 3rd one to finally get the EMR system that was.
Were you able to trial or were you purchasing this each time?
They were trialed, thank God.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was the second big problem that we had. And, should we have looked around, did a little more homework? Yeah, you coulda, shoulda, would sort of thing, right? And we thought we had the right ones. We were sold on certain systems. Second one came in, "Oh, we can improve on this," bang, bang, bang. And it took 3 tries to do this. Expensive, to do this, mind you, because you have to transfer files, and blah, 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 et cetera, right? It was not a great thing. So we are 10 times smarter now. We know how to do this right now. People have come to see us and talk to us about it, and we sort of say, "Here's our lessons learned." So we have more lessons learned. This is where our intellectual property is, right? If you think right now, it's our lessons learned, what we've learned right now. And there's a couple right there that we went, wow, Lloyd.
I think for our future potential listeners of this podcast, they're going to get a lot of gold from this conversation, Doug. So thank you for your willingness to do this. So one of the other things I really wanted to dive into is partnerships to do this, because you're a municipality. You're never before in the business of running primary healthcare or any kind of healthcare for that matter. What partnerships were critical for you to do this?
That is an excellent question, because we really thought about this in the beginning. I can tell you the struggles that we went through. This started as 2 doctors and myself in my office on a Friday evening. This is where it started. Dr. Jesse Pawarchuk and Dr. Fallujah. And neither of them were actually family doctors. They were internists. And but Dr. Pawarchuk, Jesse, his wife is actually a family doctor, so he was speaking on her behalf. And in fact, so it was interesting how we talked about a lot of things, and we kind of got giddy about it, to tell you the truth. And I remember we had our first meeting on a Friday at 4:00, and we sort of left around 7, and we were just putting stuff on whiteboards and actually being really silly, to tell you the truth. The second week, I actually invited our then MLA in, and I said, and she was wondering why I wanted her in, and I said, "Well, I need you to get this in front of the Minister of Health. I'll write the brief, minister's brief." "Oh, you know how to do that?" I'm like, "Oh, crap, yeah, I've written briefs for the Minister of National Defense before. So yeah, I know how to do it. No problem. So we talked about this and all the resistance we were going to have. Like we knew it going into this right now. We even had it with some of the doctors, who didn't like this whole idea. But what we did is how we built this up is we found a bunch of very senior doctors, and I won't name them because I don't have their permission to do this at this point in time, but we did get a number of very, very senior, well-respected doctors in the Greater Victoria area. We got them aboard and they helped us with this. But I decided, I looked at we spent the time in the beginning to look at the legal ramifications of what we were doing. We had to make sure we were breaking the Canada Health Act, and we had to make sure we were breaking the BC, whatever the act they have, and once we found out we weren't, and once we found out that, there is a phrase in the community charter that we are responsible for the health and well-being of our citizens, meaning doing family doctors, mind you, we defined it broadly that way. It's funny because I'm going to digress a little bit here because it's key to your listeners right now. When we first started this, I'm going to tell you, not everyone on council was on side. It was the same old thing. Again, one particular councillor said, hey, this is not our swimming lane. What the hell are we doing? And I said, let me think about that one. How about this? Where is the community charter that says that we are responsible for homelessness and for affordable housing? Where? It's not there. It is totally a provincial responsibility. But guess who's looking after it right now? Look at the amount of money that municipalities are putting in this. And there's nothing in the charter about that. But it does say that we're responsible for the health and well-being of our citizens. So what's the difference? And I said, and this is a cost-neutral, it could be a cost-neutral venture if we do this right. And so once we got them aboard, the bottom line is that we knew who the people that were going to resist this with greatness, and they were there. So I can tell you that you try to buy in, but you try to get their buy-in. I always gave them information. We never left anyone out of this. But when I knew that they weren't part of the decision making, now they were maybe influencers. I would not doubt that. I found a champion. I found a champion in the minister himself. He was a champion. And I tell everybody this is what really happened. And the truth of the matter is that was Adrian Dix at the time.
Yeah. What can you say is your understanding of why Adrian Dix got behind this when people around him were not?
Yeah, that happened big time. I would say his deputy minister, Steve Brown at the time, on side too, in actual fact. It made us a lot of sense. And here's the bottom line, Valerie, that I posed to them. This isn't going to cost you anything, right? This is not your risk. And I'll bear the risk. And I even told that to my own council. Look, you know what? I feel so passionate. I know that this is why. Don't worry, because if it goes sideways real quick, I'll take the fall and everyone will kick me out of office. Big deal. I just knew what I was doing was right, was the bottom line. But you know what? Most councils that time said, no, we believe in this. This is friggin' awesome. What a brilliant idea.
Most. Yeah. But I'm guessing that the opposition was about the notion that we should not do this because then we're agreeing that it's okay for healthcare to be downloaded onto municipalities.
That's correct.
That's what we hear all over the place. And in the work I'm doing in our company, Community Healthcare Systems, with Dave Saunders and Mark Holland, when we come into communities and talk about healthcare as an economic driver, and you cannot have community resilience without it. So the sooner you get on board with making sure you have access to healthcare, the sooner you're going to be a more desirable place to live, a more well-rounded community that offers the things that people need. People aren't coming to communities when there's no healthcare available.
Absolutely. And it's funny how fast everybody fell into this right away. As I had one of the biggest developers here tell me, they said the following: we can't pay for this marketing. Imagine us on our flyer saying that come to Colwood and you get a family doctor. They can't pay for that. There's no money in the world they could spend to beat that, So that's why they jumped aboard really quickly on this by offering discounts to the doctors for brand new homes. It was a no-brainer for them.
Yeah, actually, can you just follow that thread for a minute? What other things did the community at large, not just the municipal government, but what did the community at large step up to make this happen?
It's unbelievable. Like I've been approached by a number of business. We haven't taken them up on this yet because we were kind of worried about this one where, the businesses were all coming in saying, hey, if you can issue them a card or something, we can give them 10%, 15% discounts, so they feel welcome in the community. And I thought about it for a little while and I thought, well, this is great. But then I was feeling a little reluctant there too, because, there's suggestions for other professions, like all our first responders. I just thought to myself, when does this stop? So I reluctantly turned that offer down, but there was the whole business community just came up and said, hey, let's do this. It may be something we want to consider later on. I don't know, to keep it buy local. I'm trying to tie it into a buy local type of program, thinking bigger on this right now instead of just being small focused on, 8 doctors, right? So I thought, don't know if I want to go there. But I could just tell you how they welcomed them to the community. Like when I went to introduce our doctors to the community, that it turned out 300 people. It was just incredible. How do you feel more welcome than that? It was wow. And, the gala, like I said, alone was another telltale sign. The doctors felt like, wow, this community is behind us big time. So just these little things, like I call them the little wins. And whenever I do change, change management is about actually planning wins. And a lot of people don't know that. I said, no, you plan little wins. Here, 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 here. And you celebrate them, right? Because they're milestones, they're tiny milestones. And it's not this big one thing that's going to happen that's going to just be revolutionary. And they're going, oh my God, I love this. No, it's a lot of little changes. I've done this throughout my private industry career, right? When I had to come in and introduce change, it's planning out the little small successes as you go along. So I would say it's just these little tiny things, these acknowledgments of them within the community all the time, and they know about it and they appreciate it. So I would say that they feel wanted here in the community. And in most communities, I don't think people know who the doctors are in their communities, to tell you the truth, except those that have a doctor, but people don't know who the doctors are in their community. So, they've got a lot of notoriety here, that's for sure, in this community.
So exactly how long has it been since your first doctor, Cassandra?
February last year she came.
25. Okay. So just not yet a year and a half.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So in this time, what would you say is maybe a few of the key impacts that the clinic has had on attachment and community resilience? So a broader perspective than just access to healthcare that's being supported by having access to primary healthcare.
Well, I can only do this anecdotally because
of course,
we don't have a measurement per se.
We should talk about that.
Yeah, I could just tell you right now, I have our communications department that monitors social media. And it's been so overwhelmingly, 500 positive notes to every one negative one sort of thing, right? And the other measurement is I cannot go anywhere in this community, not one place in this community, without being given a hug or a handshake.
That sounds terrible.
Right? Yeah. It's absolutely crazy. And they said, past councils have just done things, like they always do, past bylaws, do this. But talk about something revolutionary, to do something, and that's actually looking after everybody. Now, and when I say everybody, some people say, well, some people have family doctors already. Yep, great. No complaints. Everyone should have a family doctor. But it's funny because even some of that critical person back in early 2004, when I was talking about this, was talking to me saying, nah, I don't think so. I had to wait it out and everybody else should have to do it. It's not your problem. And I says, well, it is our problem. It's not my problem. It's our problem as a community. And I said, what is community to you? What is a city to you? I'm a community builder. And this is community building, as much as putting parks in, as much as putting the amenities in. This is community building. When you have healthy people, that that's the basis for anything that happens within the city, right? So I look at it that way. I'm so upbeat about it, and by personal experience, I can tell you that. And I've even shared this story nationally when Minister Michelle was here. I talked to CBC National, and I shared something with my wife's permission. And it was interesting in 2025, my family doctor, I finally went and talked to my family doctor because he was forced on me, or I was forced on him by the cardiologist. I asked him, I says, my wife hasn't had a family doctor in 20 years either. Do you think it's possible that you would take her on? And he says, well, of course. I'll do that for you, Doug. He says, I like you engineers, and what you've done for the community is pretty phenomenal. So this isn't even one of our Colwood Clinic doctors. It's one from Langford. And so it was interesting. She went for her first annual last November, and they found out she had breast cancer. And that was a story in itself. And I couldn't have paid for this, right? She was checking properly, but no, she didn't detect it. He did. And it was serious enough that she had her operation in January. So like it all happened, bang, 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 bang. And to this day, they've got it all. She hasn't had any reoccurrences of this or anything. But that's another story in itself, like why it's important to have a family doctor. And I've heard another story from, someone in our community that has a family doctor. And I think it was Dr. Mo or Dr. Cassandra who found something, and thank God. I mean, they're just going, oh my God, you don't even understand the impact of this. So it's not just on the surface that they're not just a stat. Let me put it that way. This is real human interaction. This is real humanity happening right now. And I get kind of emotional about it in actual fact, because that's the impact. That's the difference. It's not getting that hug in Quality Foods or that heck over at Thrifty Foods or whatever, right? It's that we're making a real difference in people's lives right now. Like, it's, and that is a reward in itself. And I just sort of say, hey, if that's my legacy, so that's my legacy. But we have done so many other neat things here in the city aside from, like, I find doing this other stuff, the normal council stuff, just boring as heck. I like the projects. I like making those impacts, right? So that's why I just love doing this, and I'm going to do whatever I can to make this succeed. And also, I have spent a heck of a lot of time helping other municipalities right now, because they're doing something very similar to us right now, very similar. Some have modified it a little bit. Good for them. They're getting what fits for their communities. But I'm talking from very small communities to very large cities. So it's interesting what's happening right now.
Yeah. Imagine you fielded a lot of questions since the news.
Almost every week I'm on video, spend a couple hours almost every week talking with different cities. And the latest one was a very small district up northern BC, 3,000 to 5,000 people. And they have to change what they're doing because they're losing all their doctors to retirement now. And they're looking at a different type of model of doing this, right? And they kind of like what we're doing because it's the golden handcuffs, right? That whole idea. And they kept on saying, well, what permissions do you need? I says, you don't need permission. That's the interesting thing. You've got to set this up. And in fact, Minister Osborne is actually encouraging this right now. Big time. I know, I've seen her, and she's encouraging this for a lot of cities. It depends on your circumstances, right? Like I said, it's not necessary. Langford decided to go a different way. They've decided to do it the traditional way, just hire the doctors and sign them up to a couple-year contract and the overhead, and hopefully they stay with you,
So do you have an understanding of what drove Langford to go a different way?
No, because if you think about it right now, it wasn't an initiative that was led by the city itself, right? This was led by, but they rebranded themselves now. It's not called the West Shore Primary Care Society, but they call themselves something else.
South Island Primary Care Society.
Yeah, that's right. And that's Spence Cleve, Dr. Spence Cleve. It's another one of Spence Cleve's clinics, right? So good for him. I mean, what him and Alyssa are doing right now is pretty phenomenal too. And I'm very supportive. And in fact, I've reached out to them and said, hey, listen, if I can help out some way right now, because It's all the West Shore people benefiting. I'm willing to, look at requests for some of my money that I've collected during my gala to help you maybe buy equipment. I'm all ears. So we're not saying, you're Langford. No, I'm looking at if this is going to benefit the entire community, I'm all ears. I want to grow.
Okay. So for listeners, probably specifically to listeners outside of British Columbia, what we're talking about right now is your solution was a municipal government-led solution.
Correct.
The solution in Langford is being driven by a nonprofit society who takes on the role of running the clinic, hiring the physicians to work in it, the business end. So the physicians still come in and get to practice medicine and see patients. The society takes care of the business things, whereas in Colwood, the city does.
Right.
Yeah. So those are the options that we're seeing really a lot of interest in right now. And so one of the many reasons we wanted to have this conversation today was to let people out there know what their communities can be considering if they're unclear on what some of the different options are besides post a job for a physician and hope someone comes and takes it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So even the initiative, Valerie, even the initiative to hire Americans where the BC government spent $5 million advertising the US. Now, that whole concept and that idea, I really give a lot of credit to Minister Osborne, but the initial idea came from us in actual fact. And which was interesting because that's where they launched it from, right? They came to Colwood and they launched that whole initiative from our clinic. So, we were an integral part of that idea. Let me put it that way. And I think this is the gift that keeps on giving to the ministry because, we're the first ones that if we find a fault in the system, we're not just going to complain about it. We come up with ideas on how to fix it. And then we sent it to her and then she goes, well, what can I say? She sent in major teams to come and look at the building, for example. And we said that this is just beyond our control right now. So, and they came in, we went a long ways to resolving the issues. So everybody benefits from it in the end, so.
Dreams can be shared and other communities can benefit from your innovation and hard work so far.
Yeah, like I said, I get too much credit. There's so many good people that have been involved with this, just phenomenal people. And, there's so many hidden things, unheralded things that are being done right now that, and I don't like taking credit. I tell you, the team has just been fantastic up and down, including the doctors. So, I'm going for the ride right now, but we are looking at things and how we can make it better, how we can integrate more allied health care workers now. One of the big things that I'm looking at, Valerie, right now is I've been talking with developers right now about, maybe giving them density bonuses if they build me a clinic at the bottom. I'm looking at a 6,000 to 8,000 square foot facility. So we do want to expand on this. We're not going to get ahead of ourselves on this, but we already know that we're in trouble, that we're just due to our own success, we're going to have to do something else here. We need to have expanded facilities and maybe look at nurse practitioners, how we can set up a different model for them, looking at getting an x-ray facility here in Colwood, getting a life labs because we have neither out here in the city. And then we're growing fast enough right now where it's going to justify itself right now, especially when we expand this to Metchosin and South Langford. It's the numbers are there.
That's a great segue into some of the things that I wanted to talk about in terms of the work that Community Healthcare Systems is doing is about all the non-healthcare related things a community can do that will ultimately increase their access to healthcare. Right. So changes to your official community plan that support this kind of initiative, for one, accessing grants, unspent money for things that communities don't realize could be spent on increasing access to healthcare. So I know Dave talks about that a lot. Like,
oh, yeah.
He likes to look in communities' accounts and see, unspent grant money because they think it's a very narrow usage, but it's actually broader than communities think, and it could be used to set up clinics like this, make changes to housing to increase access to affordable, attainable housing specifically for healthcare providers, emergency workers, et cetera. All kinds of things that will be very attractive and cause economic development all the way around. So it's a symbiotic system, but people see healthcare as a pillar or as, a standalone thing, everything else separate around it. It's it's very intertwined. And the sooner our communities get the hang of that,
Absolutely.
faster they'll be doing things like you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dave Saunders is a genius, actually. He's a little ahead of his time, I must admit. You know, Dave was talking to me when I was president of the Chamber of Commerce back 2013. That's the first time he started talking to me about this. And I thought, wow, geez, this guy is he's really out there. He's got some really interesting ideas. Not in a negative way. I just thought, wow, you kind of shake your head and you go, can this be true? Can we make this happen? And he was very visionary, and, that's what I like about him right now. Like he's a visionary. He's got these ideas, and I like people with ideas. I'm the implementer guy, right? If you say, hey, let's get this done, I'm going to get it done by hook or crook. Those guys with a lot of imagination. And, I tend to have some imagination, but maybe, this was new to me. Remember, healthcare was new to me. I didn't understand any of it. I did not understand the lingo. And I've got to tell you about the first brief that I wrote when I wrote that one to the minister, that the doctors just had to scream and laugh because I was taking the notes as they were speaking and I thought I understood and I put something and then I emailed it to them on the weekend. I remember because we decided to do it on the Friday, and Monday my briefing note was ready. And I surprised my MLA because she didn't figure she would see it for 2 months. And I had it ready for Monday. But I remember them just having a laugh. No, let me explain this to you, Doug. This is what this is. And not only that, they were using so many acronyms. And I'm like, oh, yeah. So I went from, being so far down the totem pole about understanding medical lingo to where, I'm competent enough to speak about it. Now I'm not an expert by any means, but Dave was probably one of the biggest influences to me at the start. He got my head going, and then I started throwing these ideas with my doctor. But, once you get something in my head and the juices are going, then, stand back, just I'll get it done. That's basically. And so Dave was instrumental in that. I should have said that in the beginning. So he was probably one of the biggest influencers on me. So
he's an encyclopedia information about what municipal councils can do with their funds for things like healthcare that they don't understand is possible. I think that's really, he has a lot of parts to his mission, but that's key among them. Like, it just makes him crazy when he sees that money sitting on the table that could be fixing some big problems in communities. So, yeah. So you telling your story today and how that all is interconnected is really important, I think, for people to understand. If you think that you don't have any options to explore, you do. You just don't see them as those options right now. It just putting a different lens on it. And being willing to innovate and take a chance, which you have done in so many ways. And look, for someone who didn't have a doctor, be a champion of build your own clinic and they will come.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
That's a great story. Okay, so let's talk about future vision. Mm-hmm. Where do you see the greatest opportunities for innovation in this space in, say, the next 3 to 5 years?
Okay, great question. So I don't know what I can tell you right now. There's some things I've got in camera. I'm going to be innovating some pretty neat things. Very similar to what you just said, what Dave was talking about. A lot of ideas are going to come to fruition for us. We're even looking at city lands right now and what we can do with that and how we can integrate maybe housing, how we can the whole gamut of things right now, and to have integrated healthcare right in one facility. And to serve, Colwood, South Langford, and the chosen sort of idea that. That's where our head is. It's a more grandiose idea of what we want to do here. And walk before we can run right now. And it's doing the homework right now. So there's a lot of things being done behind the scenes that the public isn't seeing because it's not for public consumption at this time. But you got to do
I think you're talking about things that we have documented, that community healthcare systems has documented in our playbook and our toolkit.
Yep. There is a lot of the elements in that. Yep.
The broad strokes ideas are all in there for communities to look at and interpret in the way that fits their community. The playbook being the big ideas and the toolkit being how to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For your listeners out there, I would highly recommend that as a mandatory read before you venture off. Unfortunately, when we started this, not the whole thing wasn't finalized at the time. You guys were going through the motions of getting it all approved, and it took you quite a while too. But I did see the drafts, and so some of the ideas in there, absolutely. So not everything was original from us. There's a lot of ideas people had out there, and a lot of it actually came from the handbook, to tell you the truth. And I think it's mandatory reading for anyone that wants to venture off on this. In fact, I've been promoting the handbook for you guys when I've been talking with these other cities. I've been saying, hey, you should take a look at that. It should be the first thing that you look at before you venture off at this.
Well, we really appreciate your endorsement. And I mean, the things you're doing are well documented, like in terms of the steps to what you did and have been doing are in both the playbook and the toolkit. And that if listeners want to take a look, they can find them on our website, communityhealthcaresystems.ca. I'll put a link up at the end of the podcast for people. But yeah, your thoughts, ideas, and work to date there's a footprint in there.
Oh, absolutely. Not going to argue that at all.
Yeah,
so
most definitely.
Where credit's due, that's for sure. So.
Yeah. So just circling back to sort of like there's still naysayers out there, as you know, about doing innovations like you are doing and others that communities are trying. Where do you sit? Like, what are your thoughts on communities wrestling with the notion that doing this work is accepting the healthcare system downloading its responsibilities? Like, what do you say about that? Because clearly you don't believe that. But how do you counteract that belief? What's the...
I never interfere with how other municipalities feel about this right now. I can tell you, that's a great question, Valerie, because this has come up time and time again, where I've had councillors from municipalities throughout BC have come to visit me, and they can't convince their mayors to do something similar to this right now. And it's a frustration. And I said, well, listen, we have made it a policy now, until you get a council resolution saying that this is where you want to go, we're not going to spend a lot of time with you, answering your questions and things like this, not unless you're trying to prep for, to make that approval. It's a personal belief. I can tell you the ones that have ended up deciding to do this was because of the citizens. The citizens created the conditions, because they're the ones that started writing it up to their mayors and council saying, you got to do something. You've got listen to us. If it's the Colwood model, if it's whatever model, you've got to do something about this. We cannot continue to do what we're doing. It's the old adage and definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing you've always done and expect different results. So I think a lot of it, from what I hear right now, has been created by their citizens writing to their councils. Because I've heard some mayors saying, yeah, geez, just so much uproar right now. People are looking at you guys and seeing what's happening in the news, and you guys are just getting a lot of mileage out of this right now. And it's one of the advantages. I talked to Spence Cleve and Alyssa, and they're saying, that's one thing that we had, is because we're a government and we've got a lot more. They've done some wonderful things too, but they don't get as much media coverage. It's because of who we are, right, as a city. And I said, yeah, maybe. I don't know. I didn't ask for this. We just sort of did it. And I tried to do it through the back door. I didn't want to be on CBC National. I didn't want to be on CTV National. They came to us. At one time, it was just a couple newspapers picked it up saying, hey, we're doing something different. And then it exploded. Like, it just exploded. And that wasn't the idea. I had never had plans for that. I didn't have a plan to even deal with the media on this. We just said, let's quietly get this done. Really, I'm serious.
And then it blew up.
Yeah. But it's like a lot of things that we're doing right now. Like even the grumpy taxpayers give me the Candy Cane Award again this year, because we quietly put in a performance metrics in for the entire city. Like, what city does that? Like, no city. And that, here we go again. We started something again. So, but I quietly try to get it done. Let's do what's right for, the citizens. I really don't care what the rest of the world thinks.
I think it comes down to a fundamental understanding you had that a lot of communities still don't, but are kind of waking up to. About 6 months ago, we were talking about, what are the big economic drivers in Canada right now? So this is, sort of after the Trump tariffs came in, but, before time. before where we are now. I'm just looking at what were the biggest employers across the country, and healthcare is consistently in the top 3 across
Great.
Canada, and in many provinces, it's number 1.
Yeah, I agree.
But down at the community level, we're not looking at it that way. And so, yeah, that's kind of become a pillar of our work, is to educate communities. Lake Cowichan that we're working with right now is a classic example. It's rural. It's a half-hour, 30-kilometer plus drive from there to any center of any kind. And since they lost their resource-based economy more than 20 years ago, I have from afar witnessed them go down to 0 doctors 3 times now.
Wow. Okay.
So nothing really replaced that resource-based economy. People retired out of it. They left town. Nothing came to fill its place. They do have a bigger tourism sector, but it's seasonal. And
Yes.
it in no way replaced the economic base of the fishing and logging industries that have since folded up. And so they're in that catch-22. Doctors might go there, but they don't stay because there's no economic development going on for their spouse, their kids, other things they want to be doing. And it's hard to attract them when there's no economic base to help support it. So we're trying to break that wicked problem by doing community resilience planning with them, which is healthcare and economic development.
Right.
Healthcare is an economic driver.
Absolutely. I understand.
We know you get that.
Yeah. Well,
But it would help maybe for our listeners to hear you, again, you already have said it, but just hit that home in how many ways you've experienced that to be true.
all over the place. And it's my vision, and I'm going to make sure you understand it's my vision. It's not yet the vision of council. But as you know, in Colwood, we have this core area right across from West Shore Parks and Rec, right now being occupied by car dealerships right now, basically. The courthouse, not a lot of things going on there. So my grand vision, and I've expressed this to the Jimmy Pattison group, is I would love that to be, everyone's chasing green technology or high technology in Saanich and Victoria. Because of our proximity to the Victoria General Hospital, I would love to see, my vision is to have it all a healthcare center of excellence in the core. And what I mean by that is I don't necessarily want to pursue government buildings there. I'm looking more along the lines of private industry healthcare. And what do I...
Innovative healthcare.
Why, you got it. Innovative healthcare. I've basically had my first success, of which I hope to announce within the next 3 or 4 months here. But I see this as being the future, and it will drive a lot of economic development, because once you start getting 1 or 2 of these things, others follow. I'm going to tell you, I'm a strong believer in that. And that's the niche that I am going after myself. And now it's convincing. Now, the point is the next election is this October. But so is it too late to start this new initiative with the current council? I think so. And hence one of the big reasons why, I have this feeling that I do want to rerun one last time, because I want to start this and finish this. So that's one of my biggest drivers right now.
I was just going to say, I do not get the sense that you are finished. Amazing. Okay, so just moving towards the end of our chat today, I wanted to invite you to give some words of wisdom for those who come after you in doing this kind of thing. And I was wondering, so let's start with, did anything happen where you thought about quitting when you were standing up the Colwood Clinic model? And if so, what turned it around?
Quitting is a pretty strong word. I'm not a quitter. I'm sorry. I'm just not. Guess what? If you try to bully me, I get more rigid and I will try to outsmart you and outmaneuver you. I'll tell you the story. You probably heard through the rumor vines that this actually happened. And now they're all aboard. Now they support it. It's funny how people switch. I tell people it's like there's no difference in government than when I was in private industry, where I had to bring major change in. And basically, when you bring major change in, 10% of the people are jump aboard and are helping you right away. 10% of the people, no matter what you do, they're going to try to make you screw up and make it fail. Okay. The other 80% are sitting on the fence going, who's going to win? Who's going to win? And the philosophy and the way you manage that is it's the 80% that you should be working on, not the 10%.
Not the time.
Okay. And in private industry, we even had a more brutal way of doing it. And I learned this from working from two CEOs who were, top 40 under 40 here in Canada and US. And bottom line is they said, that 10% that are against you, you retire them very quickly. That's how they do it in private industry. And, I can't necessarily do that here in a municipality, but you do understand who they are or who you're going up against. And then I'm not saying you work around the people, you communicate, you continue to communicate. You never fail to communicate, but you just have to make sure that you ignore and know that you're doing this for the right reasons, that you get the majority of the people. So the bottom line thing that I always tell people when you're doing this right now, if you are implementing something like this, the biggest piece of advice that I can give you is communicate. That's all I can say. You have to do that. And that is probably the best way to get this implemented, is communications.
Spoken like a true visionary.
Well, it's so true, though. It happened.
Oh, yeah. No, I appreciate your really candid words about don't focus on the 10, double down on the 80.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm telling you right now, it's and they will energize you too. They will energize you. And then more of that 80 becomes, that first 10 that are with you become 20, and it becomes 30, then it becomes 40. And once that inertia is going, you can't stop, right? People see that, then all of a sudden these naysayers are flipping, the ones that can't really get rid of, right? So
it'd be interesting to know who among that original audience of people would now consider themselves full-on champions.
There's one for sure, I know. Yeah.
Good point. What are you most proud of about this venture?
The people that I've worked with have been just phenomenal. Like, what drives me every day is that I just love working with people and the new people I've met so far. This is all about people in the end, right? It really is. People say, well, it's a process, it's this, it's that, it's methodology. No, it's about people. It really is. And I've met people that I would never met in my life, right? In the healthcare profession. And, it's really interesting. My wife can't even go to a doctor, and they're not even family doctors, and they all know who I am. And they we love him. He stuck it to everybody. Wow, what he's done there is pretty phenomenal. And we wish there was more leaders like that politically that would just step in like that. So yeah, I think that's what I have to say about this. It's just the people. Oh, even meeting you, for God's sakes, that, pretty phenomenal. I mean, I just love meeting people that are just smarter than me, because I like learning things, right? And I sit there and, I love learning new things, and I soak it all in, believe me. And just seeing them succeed now. It's a funny thing that, Val, I'm 7 decades old, right?
Are you really?
Yes. And wow. That's why
I would not have thought that.
That's why I've done so many things in my life. And now it's funny. Your whole perspective changes when you don't have to do the scoring anymore. I don't want to score anymore. I want to be like when Gretzky got older, right? What he did was assist, right? And I get more pleasure out of that now. I really do. It's phenomenal when people say, thank you, you made the biggest impact in my life. And I go, wow, that is more rewarding than any money you can give me. And, I guess I was that way earlier too, because I eventually became mayor. But before that, I was just the Mr. Volunteer. I was on the board of governors at Rural Roads. I ran the business school for 5 years there. I was president of the Chamber of Commerce. I was president of the West Shore Rebels football team when we went from last to first and played for the national championships. I've been blessed with all the things that I've done. Even on the board of governors with a conservatory of music. What do I know about music? Nothing. I can't even sing, for God's sakes. But it's all those adventures, and it was all the different people I've met across the spectrum now, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not politically aligned. Everyone tries to politically align me with something. I just believe in doing the right thing. I don't care what party affiliation you have, but it's the people. I love helping now. I think I get more joy out of helping people do things now. And, because all my life, before I became a counselor and then the mayor, everything I did was volunteer. I never charged a penny from anybody. And it helped me big time, because when I eventually ran for counselor and mayor, all these people came out of the woodwork and said, you did all this for me, and you never charged me a cent. I want to support your campaign. And I had I had more financing than I knew what to do with, to tell you the truth. Any venture, and I love this. And this is the best part of this job right now. And just watching some of the counselors grow, I look at some of the city employees grow right now. I have so much more fun. I get joys on different things now. That's what I really like doing now. In fact, I was out with someone the other day ago. He was a major restaurateur here in the city. And he says, man, thanks for helping me with this and this and this, because I wrote him a software program to help him track costs. And he says, how much do you know about this? I says, well, I know how to do this. This is no-brainer stuff. And he just says, you're crazy. He says, how valuable you should be charging people for this. And I says, not really. I mean, I don't really need that. I says, Jesus, I'm a mayor. And, they don't pay me diddly squat anyways. And I says, I would have did the job for free, to tell you the truth. And as long as, and that's what my daughter says about me, that she thinks I'm crazy at how many people I just help. But I says, but it all turns around and it helps you in the end. Like I've been more fulfilled now, not being paid to do things and helping others right now. And I genuinely, really mean this right now. And if anything I can do to better the lives of our citizens here, and that's great. That's the biggest reward. And like I said, getting that handshake, getting that hug right now is way more important to me than anything that you could ever try to pay me right now, right? That's unbelievable. And I don't know, for some reason, they recognize me. I don't know why. I tried to grow a beard. I never had a life. I got long. You haven't seen
You're
you.
on the radar now, Doug.
Yeah. So.
Well, what I really heard come through loud and clear was that you follow your own North Star.
That's bottom line, yes.
And you love passion projects, and some of them end up, changing the way healthcare is delivered in a community and beyond. So I just want to say thank you for all that you do and for taking your time to come and share this with us today. I think this is going to really help a lot of people figure some things out, make some plans perhaps. You're an incredible inspiration.
Thank you very much, Valerie. And thank you for everything you do too. You're a pretty phenomenal individual yourself. So
I thank you. I think we're just getting going. So to be continued, and definitely have you back. I really want to thank you again for your time today and your willingness to be our very first guest on Waitlist Nation. I can't wait to see where this goes. We'll be keeping you posted. And for our brand new viewers coming online, please like and subscribe when you get this coming through myself and several other people to you. We want to bring more content like this, and we look forward to seeing you again.